Thank you for being here. We will call the Connecticut Advisory Council for Victims of Crime meeting to order. I see that it's 2:02 p.m. Just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being recorded and on the Judicial Branch YouTube channel. Before we get started, I think it would be appropriate, in light of some of the questions we had about who's here and who's not here, to do what we typically do, and that's just introduce ourselves so we know who's here, and then we can get started. So I will introduce myself. I'm Laura Baldini. I'm a Superior Court judge. And Susan?
Yes, so I'm Susan O'Million. I'm also a co-chair with Judge Baldini. I am an attorney. I'm a homicide survivor, and I currently do work with domestic violence and sexual assault victims, helping them move from victim to survivor to thriver with the My Avenging Angel workshops.
Thank you. Jerry Wild.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jerry Wild. I'm one of the directors of legal advocacy with the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Great. And Jessica.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Pisano, and I'm the Director of Victim Services with Survivors of Homicide.
I'm Mary.
Good afternoon, Mary Kazicki, Deputy Director with the Office of Victim Services.
And Linda.
Good afternoon. It's great to see everybody. Linda Cimino, the Director, I don't know why I said it that way, Director of Victim Services.
Ebony.
Good afternoon, Ebony Suggs. I'm the Council Supervisor of the Department of Correction Victim Services Unit.
All right. Gail.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gail Hardy, Office of the Chief State's Attorney.
Jen.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Rossi, Lead Victim Advocate for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, filling in for our Executive Director, Bob Gargiulo.
Debbie.
Hi, everyone. Debbie Whitkin, Executive Director of Connecticut Legal Services.
And Andrew.
Good afternoon, everyone. Andrew Woods, Executive Director of Hartford Communities That Care. Glad to be here.
And I see Melissa is on, not on camera, but on this call as well.
I can see myself. I'm having trouble with Microsoft Teams. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everybody.
So we have Melissa Farley on as well. We have Jean on as well. And Allison Chandler is also on. And then I do see one phone number.
That's Irene, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Irene Michael, and I'm a Victim Compensation Commissioner with the Office of Victim Services.
Have I missed anyone? I don't believe I have. Okay, so the first order of business is to approve the February 8th meeting minutes. Just confirming that we have a quorum to do that. I think we do.
We have 11. We have one excused. We have 11 present and 3 not sure.
So I think 10's our quorum, right? So I think we're good.
I have a motion to approve the minutes from the February 8th, 2022 meeting.
So moved. This is Debbie Whitkin.
Is there a second?
Second, Gail.
Is there any discussion on those minutes? No response. All in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so those minutes are approved. The next order of business is the report on the OVS victimization needs assessment. An update on that.
I think Adam's on, Judge. Adam Johnson is on.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I have a short update on the progress of the Victims Needs Assessment Project. So since we last met, we have sort of finished up our analysis of the in-depth interviews that we've completed. And then we have moved on to the final stage of data collection, the focus groups among service providers. So we are in the midst of conducting 6 different focus groups, 3 of which have been completed at this point. We had conversations amongst providers in Hartford and Bridgeport last week on the 4th, with 7 attendees in our Hartford group and 5 attendees in our Bridgeport group. We were also happy to have Mary and Linda on as observers for the first of those groups, and Mary on as an observer for the second. A lot of good conversation coming out of those groups. We had a group in New Haven last week on the 5th with 5 attendees as well. Another active conversation amongst service providers. So we're really excited with how these are shaping up. Going forward this week, we have 2 groups scheduled for the 14th. These are groups in the northeast of Connecticut and northwest, so Windham and Tolland counties for the northeast section of the state, and Litchfield counties in the northwest section of the state. Currently, we're still undergoing active recruitment to find service providers who are interested and willing to participate. So I think we have 3 people in the northeast group and 3 people in the northwest group at this point, and so we are still, as of today, conducting more phone and email outreach. I do welcome if any of you all have groups or organizations that you think might be either a good fit for these discussions or that you feel would have some excellent insight to add into these conversations. Please don't hesitate to reach out to myself after this meeting, and we can definitely start that outreach so we can sort of put more voices in so we're able to get a more rounded scope of the service provider experience. Our last focus group, excuse me, is scheduled for the April 18th, and that is going to be for New London. And again, this has been a slightly more difficult recruit for finding people who are willing and able to participate. So we are continuing to do active outreach. But our hopes are that we will have finished up with our focus group recruiting and completed the groups themselves by middle of April, with an eye towards compiling our our executive summaries on the victim side of the experience, and then our combined executive summary end of April into May, with the idea of having everything wrapped and ready to go middle of May at the latest. So any questions around that?
Judge, if it's okay to say, Mary and I have read, well, Mary's read all of them, but I've read half of the transcriptions from the in-depth interviews. I find them very interesting. I think there's a lot of kernels in there for us to look at, us OVS, but also us in the realm of those who provide services to victims. I think one of the most, for me, and Mary, you can certainly give voice to this, but for me, one of the most affirming is that, especially how we here at OVS attempt to communicate with victims, but there is a common thread that what providers are trying to say and what victims are hearing are often very, very different. So some of the participants have been very descriptive in the differences, and also several have been very vocal in their disappointment with lack of services. So I very much appreciate the time that each victim, there's 39 interviews, and a few more victims on top of that took to do that, because I think it's very valuable for us.
Certainly a lot of things to take away from those meetings, I'm sure, and ways that things can be improved upon or at least discussed, and hopefully that disconnect ironed out.
You know, Judge, and again, Mary, if you have, if you want to chime in here, one of the things that I so appreciate is as we sit around our collective advocacy tables and talk about some of the challenges of the system, as we see it as part of the system, those challenges are so reflected in the consumer of the system. Access, signage, being treated in ways, being able to understand, being able to access advocates. It's really interesting that, again, we go from what we know as anecdotal, and here it is, it's proven out in victims' words. So it's exciting.
I agree with everything that Linda said. There definitely are some trends that we are seeing, and definitely some areas that we can focus on as we move forward. Certainly pieces around knowledge of services, and as Linda said, as we see from our vantage point to then hear from a victim's vantage point, those challenges, there is a lot here that we can work with moving forward, and I'm excited about the work that we have in front of us.
Right. Any other questions or comments?
I had a question of where we have a meeting in June, Adam. So just sort of what the timeline is going forward here.
So we'll wrap up the focus groups over the next week or so. And then we will move into final reporting. Everything should be done and compiled and ready to go well in advance of that June meeting, where we can present our final findings if you'd like.
Great. That was the question I was getting to. Yes, just because I know you've kept us up to date on a great. Really well, and so it's not like we need to know the end of the story, but yes, we'd like to know the end of the story.
No, I'm just as excited as Linda and Mary are around this. I think it's really fascinating and interesting research, and I am really looking forward to being able to sort of turn that last page and have the final conclusions presented to everyone.
Right. And I think a number of us around the council table, some of who aren't here today, but we're interested as policymakers and people who are in the system. This is really important information and really helpful information. So thank you for all your work, Adam, and your staff and all those folks out there. Yes.
Very happy to help.
Okay. Move on. Susan, did you want to?
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to do the second part of the meeting here. So we're going to have our OVS report. Is Jim going to be on? Linda, you're on mute, I think, or something.
We can't see you, Susan.
Okay.
I can see her. Okay.
That may be. Go ahead.
All right, Jim is on vacation, so I am you've got the runner-up here, or the pitch hitter. So and thank you, Jean, for sending out the information for the council. As always, I'll start with the compensation report. As you can see, under the appropriated funds for 2021, we've 21-22 to date from we've dispersed $1.978 million. That's through March 31st, which is 278,000 more than we had awarded in the same time period last year. So it's seeming to make sense. Our application receipts are trending up, and now the expenses are trending up. We have $883,000 left to spend between now and the end of June. So we certainly have enough money to cover all of the obligations that we currently have and we expect to have. And that you can see at the bottom part, we're carrying $303,000 worth of obligations, with the majority of that being waiting for, with the majority of that money being related to loss of support payments. And that, so we have obligated almost 80% of our budget for the year, and we still obviously have three months left. So the compensation is in good place. If Jim often says this, and I'll just remind you, if you look to the middle of the sheet, you can see balances where we have $42,000 in VOCA, the Victims of Crime Act grant, and we have $841,000 in our Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund. That is because maybe 3 years ago, a federal audit pointed out that we should be spending the federal VOCA money first before we use our state money. So we have followed suit on that. So we have, at this point, that 41 is probably spent, and we're now 100% spending our VOCA fund. Our Criminal Injuries Compensation funding. Any questions on that? Okay, and then on court revenue, we received 709. I'm just going to read right from Jim's notes. We received $709,400 in court revenue through February 28th. We're always a month behind in the court revenue, which is $245,000 higher than it was through February 28th of 2021. Through the end of February of this year, we are actually receiving 97% of prior year collections. So we're starting to see that again tick up. And the revenues into the CICF are, as of March 31st, are $470,000 higher than they were through March 31st, 2021. There is a trend that I'd like to share with the council, though, and it's probably was an unintended consequence of a legislative change a couple years ago. I apologize, I don't know what year this went into effect, but there was legislative change that allowed more fines and fees to be paid online through our criminal Centralized Infractions Bureau ePay line. And what we're seeing is there's a significant uptick in the number of fines that are being processed through that line, but each fine is much less. So that there, again, just to be repetitive, there are many more. So if you go back to the sheet that has the all of the court locations, if you look at before the JD courts, you'll see CIB ePay. You can see that there were 2,500. Well, let me go to the other side. So for this year so far, there are 6,194 fines and fees paid through the CIB ePay for a sum total of $331,000, which is significantly less per fine. So, so it's great that more people have easier access to pay these fines, but it's ultimately hurting the fund because it's the value of each fine is substantially lower. So again, it's a trend, unintended consequences, but it is factoring into the overall deposits into the fund.
So Linda, is that the value is reduced because they're paying like with a credit card or something? I don't understand why it's less, or the fines that they're paying for not as high as the other fines?
I think it's in part, we've seen a reduction, and we've talked about this over the years of COVID, and we are now ticking back up. I can't say to you the mechanism that goes on in court because unfortunately I don't know, but my guess is that it's all part of the agreement. Judge, do you know anything about this? I think it's part of the agreement that the prosecutor says that fees as a whole are not as high as they were, but it does seem that for whatever reason, and I wish I had a better answer, Susan, that those that are being paid through ePay or not, the CIB ePay are not as high as those that are coming in actually through court.
Does anybody else have a thought about that? Because this is something we were tracking a bit, particularly, and there's a couple of courts here that actually have zeroed out. I don't know what Norwalk and trying to use my glasses here.
Enfield and Susan.
Enfield, thank you.
Those are the two courts that have yet to reopen. So the Enfield numbers would be reflected in the Hartford numbers, and the Norwalk numbers would be reflected in Stamford.
Okay. Because otherwise it's looking, I mean, there were times when it looked like, things were falling off in terms of not only the fines being paid, but also how they were being issued. So it's that compared to 2-3 years ago, I know, Linda, you remember, this looks really good. And also that it's before COVID, it was certainly different, but even since COVID, it's definitely picking up. So any other thoughts or questions on that? Something that as the council has been trying to stay on top of. All right, and then Linda, are you going to be doing the OVS update, or whoever else is going to jump in? Go for it.
I'm going to ask Mary to start, please.
Hi again, everyone. As I reported at the last meeting, we had 9 new team members join us at the beginning of the year. They have fully transitioned to their court locations and here at the helpline, providing services. We recently held an in-service day for those new team members. They came back for a day to discuss their experiences as they've transitioned out into the courts with their supervisors. So we had an opportunity for the colleagues to learn from each other about those experiences and debrief with supervisors. As part of that day, we also distributed an evaluation tool for the orientation that they received. We're beginning to receive those evaluation tools back, and we're excited to incorporate some of those suggestions into future trainings in an effort to always provide our new team members with the best orientation possible.
And very briefly on Mary, did I cut you off?
Nope.
Okay, very briefly, we started the spring class for the Sexual Assault Forensic Examiner program this morning. We have 22 medical professionals in the class. We have a few medical professionals, nurses that heard about this class through an email announcement that we made in connection with one of our colleagues. And pretty much everybody, I believe, who's coming into the class, we received from that. I mean, everybody who's coming into the program, which is 7, we received from that email announcement. So we're very excited about this. For those of you who don't know, it's a 6-day, 42.5-hour in class, followed by an evening clinical. That's about 3 hours, an 8-hour clinical day, and then an 8-hour mock exam. So this is a fairly grueling time commitment for anybody to go through this. And it's a great group. I presented to them this morning, lots of questions. So we're very excited about that. We had a new office clerk begin her tenure with OVS on Friday. Our previous office clerk left to take a position in Hartford Housing Court. That position is critical because that position is assigned to the compensation unit, and this person's job is to send out our acknowledgement letters and get the people into our system. And really, it's the first visual materials that this person sends out are really the first visual glimpse that individuals have of OVS. So it's a high, it's very important for all that it represents. I don't think I've had enough caffeine today. We had one retirement. One of our advocates retired as of April 1st. We're all very happy for her. And we had a victim services advocate from another location transfer in, so that court is covered. And our compensation number are just going through the roof. We have, as of the end of March, I believe we had 443 applications, which is 30 more than the same time period last year. So the needs are high, and people are really finding their way to us. And the last thing I'd like to state is that April 24th through April 30th is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. I want to thank Melissa and her team for helping us put together a series of banners. I think that's is it banners or sliders? So if you go to the Judicial Branch webpage, there are informational pieces that kind of slide across. So my team here working with Melissa's unit, we've developed 6 of them, all focused on rights. This is the theme of this year's Victims' Rights Week is rights, access, equity for all victims. So we focused our sliders on victims' rights. And I just had a conversation with the Office of the Victim Advocate. This year, because we're so busy here and being pulled in so many different directions, we are not doing a public presentation. We usually do something on comp or something, but we just don't. Unfortunately, we just decided to let our partners like Jess and CCADV and to have the spotlight. And next year for Crime Victims' Rights Week, we'll have a more thorough program.
Okay. Any questions or comments on Linda's report, which she did brilliantly, particularly the Jim Morgan part? I mean,
Linda,
what's good?
No, I'm sorry, Susan. Linda, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I have noticed, especially probably over the past 4 to 6 months, the amount of referrals we've gotten specifically from the compensation unit has been wonderful. I've had people contact me and I just got off the phone with, Office of Victim Services, Compensation Department, and they said that I should give you a call. Probably more so than ever before. So I just want to thank you, because I think that also helps with our members understanding the difference between what we do and what you guys do as well. So that's been really, really helpful. Sometimes, I think sometimes in the past we'll get calls from people thinking we are you, and I'm definitely seeing more of them understanding the difference between the different victim services offices. So thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Jess.
Any other comments or thoughts or sharing? We're sharing here. All right.
So I just wanted to add on to what Jessica said about with victim comp. CCADV has been working with Rachel, Linda, with our member programs, meeting one-on-one with CCADV staff and the member program and Rachel, just to kind of go over the victim comp program again and really trying to focus to get our numbers up to make sure that we're reaching victims and telling them all about the program and getting them connected to that resource, and so that nothing's left on the table that they could use.
Great. All right. Any other comments or thoughts? Or if I can't see everybody on the screen, my screen. I'm trying to play the Hollywood Squares game here, but it's not quite complete. So please just speak up. So we're on to roundtable discussions. This is a couple of discussions we've been having for a while. We've had on the agenda for a while just to to encompass two things, generally, what's happening in the legislative world, both the state and federal legislative, and particularly now because Connecticut General Assembly is in session. And secondly, we're just picking up on any other issues around the impact of COVID and courts being open, courts not being open, some of that, and the vaccination rollout. So I'm going to start with legislative proposals. We do have a few people, a few members who did submit some information ahead of time. Not that you had to, but it's just trying to get the information flowing before the meeting. So thank you for that. So I thought we'd start with a couple of them that I've had a chance to review. I have a few questions, but since Jerry's here and Beth is not, we'll do the Connecticut Alliance also, but to do the CCADV, can you speak to some of the, and I guess the question is that we always like to know, is two questions actually, is where the legislation that you're working on as a priority is right now, and if you need any help or information sharing with the council members and vice versa. So Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you, Susan. A couple bills that are interest for CCADV are Senate Bill 5 was an act concerning protections for victims of family violence that included additional funds for domestic violence family advocates for our member programs. It also included requiring state employees to get 1 hour virtual training on domestic violence for employers with 3 or more employees. Also making family violence victim a protected class with respect to employment, housing accommodations, and credit transactions. The bill did pass the committee. Also Senate Bill 294, an act concerning housing protections for victims of family violence. That was also voted out of the committee. I know an update from the information that I sent over earlier. Last Thursday, the Appropriations Committee voted out of the committee for the budget adjustment proposal, which included allocations for domestic violence and VOCA, and actually for CCADV that and victims of domestic violence, that includes 3 specific pots of money. One being funding, again, for the child and family advocates, 1 in each of our 18 programs, and then limited a one-time allocation for fiscal year 2023, which would include pandemic relief that would cover VOCA funds, the temporary reduction of VOCA funds, and then emergency funds through DSS for victims of domestic violence.
So it's looking good. Go ahead. Somebody have a question or comment? Okay. So it's looking good that these bills that are coming out of committee, that they would be moving through the House and Senate?
Yes, we're very excited and keeping our fingers crossed, of course.
I had a question on the virtual training. I was just kind of fascinated, having done training, having been a state employee, and in the past when we had a sexual harassment training. Is that sort of the general idea of the virtual training about domestic violence? Would it be more personal for the people who might be in a situation, or just how it might impact the workplace? I just was kind of interested what you saw that training including.
It's my understanding, Susan, and I can get more information certainly or clarification, but it's a 1 hour virtual training on domestic violence for employers with 3 or more employees. And I know we've done work in the past with other non-governmental agencies around training for employers around domestic violence. I know like Aetna and some big corporations, and we have developed a toolkit a few years back as well for employers. So it's along the same lines, but specific to state employees.
Okay. Because I know many employers have the issue of when a domestic violence victim is an employee and has court cases going on or dangerous situations where the perpetrator may know where she works, but not where she's living. So those are kind of really the more meaty issues, I guess, but also just a general education would be really excellent. Yes. All right. Any other questions of Jerry? And you also included some of your general policy priorities, which I thought were really interesting and good stuff. So anything else that you need, Jerry, from us?
No, not that I could think of at the moment.
Okay.
Again, like I said, we're hoping that things continue to move forward.
Okay. And then if people had a chance to look at the Connecticut Alliance list, they I don't know where these are exactly. There's a one piece of legislation on the definition of consent. Also about to bar the unauthorized pelvic and prostate exams for patients under deep anesthesia, and eliminating the civil statute of limitations for sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, or sexual assault. So what Jeannie had sent out to everybody is a copy of that. And since Beth is not here, if you have any questions, you could let her or some of her staff know. But those are some of the issues they've been working on for a while, particularly the statute of limitations. So we'll just keep plugging along in the General Assembly. All right, and then there was also some information that Melissa, I think you sent out through Jeannie about the legislation piece on court operations. There's a summary piece and also the bill, I think, in full.
Susan, Melissa had to step out.
Okay.
Or step off.
All right. So is there anything in there, Linda, in particular, if you know, that relates to victims of crime? I did a quick read of it, but I'm not a good reader of judicial procedures, court operations. Jessica did have a question about legislation around juries, right, Jessica? There was legislation around.
Oh yeah, I was able to find the bill number. So the raised bill 434 was brought to our attention, and actually one of the Representative Summers, who actually proposed it. It's kind of funny. She actually provided some support for one of our families in a month-long trial that they had, and I believe that part of her. Part of why she put this bill forward was seeing what happened with that family and having to wait in the courthouse for the verdict to come back. We think it's an interesting bill. Again, we don't lobby one way or the other. We always just share information with our membership. It's it's something that we've talked about for a while, but unfortunately, like everything, there's unforeseen consequences with it. Yes, it'd be wonderful to give families a period of time so they wouldn't have to wait in the courthouse, but what's an acceptable period of time? Some people live 20 minutes away, but we have situations where families are 2-3 hours away, and it's not reasonable to expect that they could get that 3 hours to come back to the courthouse. So I think it's one of those things that would have to be worded carefully, and it would probably, again, be up to discretion for the judge and the prosecutor as well. So we've had some of our membership that did submit some testimony for public hearings and have reached out to the representatives about it.
Okay, that's great. All right, anything else about court operations stuff? Any other legislation? I was going to ask Andrew Woods if anything was happening with the gun violence work you've been doing in the legislature. I think he was just on my screen.
Yeah.
There he is. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm still here. I know that we're still waiting and the Senate bill was passed. There were 2 bills to establish an Office of Gun Violence Prevention that would most likely be placed inside DPH or perhaps another department. They're still contemplating some of that, but it has been passed in the Senate. And now it's a matter of identifying resources to fund the office, of which lawmakers are working on now in both chambers to identify the resources that can actually fund the establishment of the office, staffing for the office, as well as resources that will go towards programs and services that do this work primarily in the urban core. And then there are also folks who are certainly waiting and making sure that any particular allocations that have been made to individual programs stay inside the budget and that they don't get pulled out. And so we're all just keeping our eyes glued to what happens in the next couple of days, and just trying to stay on top of that so that we don't find ourselves being cut out of additional resources that we can use.
And then I think there was the news this morning about President Biden doing an executive order on the ghost guns, which I thought was interesting at a federal level. Since there hasn't been any federal action on this issue for a number of years, but he seems to have found a way to address it and see how that begins maybe another way of attacking some of these issues without trying to get the U.S. Congress to vote for them. All right, anybody else? I'm trying to see who else is. Debbie, have you been working on anything? And Linda? Debbie, and then we'll do Linda.
So we work on a lot of bills, but they're not necessarily victim oriented. And so I actually assumed that they weren't necessarily appropriate to report on here. I mean, we're doing a lot in the housing arena and elderly and some in family, but there's not a tie into victim advocacy. Okay. That's why you didn't hear from me before.
Okay. And yet I get calls from women all the time who can't get legal services because they're poor. So yeah, I mean, there's a real connection.
You know, a big piece of what's happening is the legislature did the right to counsel money, and it is diverting a lot of our resources to the right to counsel eviction defense. And I've been in, I think, like 3 hours of meetings today trying to say we can't keep ignoring the other populations that we serve. So it's a huge issue in legal aid, and we're trying to figure out how to handle this. It's great that the legislature recognizes people being evicted need attorneys.
Right.
It's just that we can't all turn into eviction defense only attorneys, or there's no one left to help everybody else. So it's an issue.
Right. It sounds like it's the trend to move money around to the big important issue that's on the front page of the Hartford Courant right now, and then the other people are like, well, how about us? All right, Linda, go ahead.
There's file number 199. It's an act expanding eligibility for victim compensation program. This bill, which was Bill 5238, has had many iterations, and it's one of those bills that started out saying one thing and now file copy says something very different. I just wanted to bring it to the council's attention in that it will require OVS to it's adding to the population that we can provide services to. Very clearly, it says an incident of child abuse or neglect substantiated by the Department of Children and Families. So we're trying to determine, or we tried to determine, what that actually means, is substantiated by DCF in the terms of numbers. And what we've heard from DCF, the numbers are very, very significant. I mean, we cover some of these children would be eligible for our compensation anyway, but it will open up the compensation program to many more, the potential for many more applicants or claimants. So I just wanted to alert you to that. And then there is, Jerry, do you know what the bill is that for the notification? Here it is. I'm sorry. It's file copy 60, which was substitute House Bill 5154, an act requiring the provision of information concerning children's mental health and domestic violence by police officers and emergency medical technicians. This is huge for us, for OVS, because it will require OVS to continue our work with CCADV, which was great, and providing a document annually to the Department of Education. So that's been going on. We work well with Liza. It's all good, great. But in section 4, of the bill, we will be required, if passed, to continue providing Department of Ed this document electronically, but also electronically and in hard copies, to provide this same document to the Division of State Police within the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, each municipal police department, each ambulance company and organization, whether private, public, or voluntary, that offers transportation or treatment services to victims under emergency conditions. It is staggering how broad that is. It's our fear, and we've talked about this, and Mary, please chime in if you'd like to. I think we have two fears in this. One, to put hard copies in anybody's hands. Once a hard copy is out there, you can't pull it back for a revised edition. And the definition of emergency conditions, our fear is that we're going to provide information to a whole host of, could be thousands of individuals who don't qualify by our statutory requirements for our compensation program. So we've expressed our concerns, and if it passes, we will do it. But there are some concerns out there about providing information to victims and almost setting them up to think that they would be eligible for something when they won't. So, two huge bills potentially coming our way.
So the last one you talked about, so ambulance drivers would be handing out information, is that what? Yeah. And that information would be stuff you'd have to supply, and you're not sure whether all those people who, could be in an ambulance might actually qualify. Yeah.
Yes.
So you don't know. Go ahead.
Yes. So I'll have obviously more at that in our, actually, if it passes, Jean, if you can help me remember, we'll send an update out after the legislative session, because if this stands as it is, it has an effective date of July 1st. So we will be doing a tremendous amount of work to get that implemented, but we will let the council know if those two have gone forward.
And you're not sure where this is coming from, or exactly whose interest it's coming from?
Well, it came out of the Kids Committee, and it's first. No, I'm sorry, I don't know. The first one we talked about came out of the Children's Committee.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Right.
This one also comes out of the Children's Committee. And I think it was attempting to get additional resources for kids who didn't necessarily qualify for Husky, but it has certainly taken many turns and curves to its current state.
Okay. So the mystery will be figured out, perhaps. All right. Anybody else have any comments or any other legislation that that they're working on? Feel free if there's some updates, particularly if you can provide a copy, something that Jeannie can send around on an email. That's no problem. It's great to have that be available. All right. Anything else on COVID issues? Victim service delivery, vaccination rollout. I know. Go ahead.
So, sorry, I just wanted to mention, because I know Melissa had to jump off, but the Raise Bill 5393 that Affairs Division provided information on, I just wanted to thank them for Section 35, authorizing the disclosure of erased records to victims who have begun a civil action to enforce financial restitution or intend to bring an action to enforce restitution. I know that's been an issue that we've heard from victims sometimes, so I think that's great. You certainly will be paying attention to that as well.
Right. That was funny, because when I was reading through this, I had checked that off and I didn't look at the last page. But the other one was there's a clean slate. You were concerned about that issue in the last legislation session, right, Jerry? About the ability for people to have some part of their records erased, or whatever the word is. having done criminal work, so as an attorney, but the kind of charges that could be erased, particularly misdemeanor domestic violence charges, was a concern. Is that
right? We had a concern as far as then would they have access to firearms down the road, or, and this is again the last legislative session, but the firearms, and then also a second round of family violence education program. Multiple bites of that apple. That was a concern that we had.
Right. All right. Okay. Any other discussion on legislation? We're moving through here. Like I said, please share if you have some updates through Jean. And then any other COVID issues? We talked a little bit with Linda and looking at the court fine data that's picked up. Some of the courts still aren't open, but any other thoughts about that? Anything the victim advocates have been perceiving out there in their world? All right. So we'll keep that on the agenda in June. This is a long session, short session, not short. Yeah, okay. So by June, we'll have some resolution of some of these issues, or not, depending on how it goes, but we'll definitely keep that moving. And also, we try to include some federal legislation. So if there's anything that you're working on at a federal level with the congressperson, I was at the CCADV breakfast the other day, and Joanna Hayes, the congresswoman from I think she's a member of District 5. She was very well spoken on issues that were pertaining to domestic violence and victims. I was very impressed. I had never heard her speak in general, let alone I was very impressed. So there's some people at the federal level. She's actually on the agricultural committee, which covers WIC and food stamps, I think, or a SNAP program. So she had an interesting perception about, where some of these kind of programs are really also serving victims of crime and sort of a recognition of that. So that was heartening to me that there are people like her that are working on these issues at that level. All right, let's go to new business. We're running, this is maybe a short meeting, which is not a problem, but just so people know. Any new business, anything that people want to talk about, anything going on, announcements or programs that they want to talk about?
Yeah, this is Debbie. I'll just note that we're starting soon the restraining order project in 3 judicial districts. This is also funded through the legislature, and judicial will be in Stamford, Norwalk, Bridgeport, Fairfield, and Waterbury. And then the other 2 legal aid agencies, Greater Hartford and New Haven, will be doing one in each of their judicial districts as well. And this will be having 1 or 2 people from each program sitting in those courthouses, working with people when they come in to file restraining orders. So we're really excited about that. So it's not all just housing.
You're gonna start plugging that.
Yeah, I got to point that out.
Ever the advocate, Debbie. Thank you.
Yes.
And don't forget. All right, excellent. Love to have some. Usually, what we do in this section of the agenda is get some ideas of some potential topics for our next meeting. So, if that's something that you want to do a little larger report on, that'd be great. Just to tie some pieces together that
Susan,
this project. Yeah.
May I interrupt? If it's okay with this council, the June meeting is the last meeting of this term, of the 4-year term. I queried everyone and love you all. You all want to stay on. So before there's too much advanced planning, if it's okay with this council, I would almost like to use the June meeting to combine this group with the victimization survey stakeholder group, so we could have a good hour and a half or 2-hour conversation on that finding. So, and then you will all receive letters from the Chief Justice appointing you to your next 4-year term. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but
and I didn't mean that it had to be the June meeting, but yes, that's great. You're right, that'd be a great time to pull a number of things together, particularly because Adam promised we'd have the end of the story, which is great. All right. Anybody else have any announcements or like that, or any upcoming things that are going on? I have two things. One is that I do have workshops coming up in the fall. I do My Avenging Angel workshops. Many of you who've been on the council for a while know what I do. They're designed for women who've come through domestic violence, sexual assault, any kind of abuse, however they describe it, child abuse. I do not duplicate the services of sexual assault crisis services or any CCDV program. I really help them move on. So I get a lot of referrals from those programs, though, of women who have gotten out, are safe, have gotten through the crisis of sexual assault, and really helping them move on. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I have a lot of what I call thriver success stories, women who've gotten out and also been able to get back to work and gone back to school and started their own business. And so it's free workshop. It's a 2-day workshop. I call it a motivational workshop. They're coming up in October and November. This is when I usually hand out the flyers, but we're not in person. So the flyers are available on my website, one of my websites, myavengingangel.com. They're on Zoom. So I've been doing them on Zoom now for the last almost 3 years, that I'm getting even people from other parts of Connecticut that generally didn't come because of transportation issues. So I had a couple people from Greenwich last time and downstate. So please, if you know of anybody who's interested or would like to make some referrals from clients, I get referrals from therapists and lawyers and doctors. It's always interesting how the women come to me. And secondly, the other thing I wanted to say is that I've been working with CCADV and the Alliance on doing a training program for their member programs about what I do and the kind of work that I think adds to what they do, and get a little bit more sense of that, and to get an idea about referrals. I started doing more of these trainings in programs. So if you're interested, if your agency is interested in having me come, and I've been doing them a Zoomy thing to talk about the kind of healing work that I've been doing. And I think it's picking up. That's why I was so interested in Representative Hayes, Johanna Hayes. She was talking about this too, in terms of what needs to be added to the system, and not just for domestic violence, sexual assault. As a homicide survivor, yes, God, please, we need a lot more of that kind of moving on kind of processing. So I think it's a piece that comes together with not only the kind of crisis intervention services that people are getting, and then the next step that they're looking for, but also the combination of social services and medical help and mental health. It's really just to get that system so that the victim is not looking at this menagerie of things and wondering who's going to help me, and is there somebody there who can help me, or even to have words for what it is that they're looking for. So in any case, if you're interested, let me know, and I would love to have some referrals to the workshops that are coming up in October and November. It's a 2-day workshop. They come to both sessions of the workshop. I have a follow-up group that's also free that meets monthly, which has also been a really great opportunity for many of the women. Okay, anything else? Anything else we'd like to?
I just wanted to share with everyone that as Linda had mentioned, we're going to be partnering up with the Office of the Victim Advocate for Crown Victims' Rights Week. I believe that they're going to be sending out the registration links within the next few days. They're looking at, there's going to be really some great programs that are coming up. I'm excited about the housing that CCADV is doing. But I just wanted to share that the 25th at Monday at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be doing a piece about SOHR services and the difference between sympathy and empathy, and why that's important in working with survivors.
Yes.
So I just wanted to share with everybody.
One of my favorite topics is sympathy and empathy, and people are like, oh, I get that now. Yeah, that's great. All right, and particularly for homicide survivors, sympathy is not enough, as they say, right? Jessica, right? All right. Any other thoughts? Any other needs? Anything else we want to cover? All right, so I think this may be, I'm looking at my clock here, that we're we're at 3 o'clock. So I think we're set. And what I'd like to just remind people, as we said before, the next meeting is Tuesday, June 14th. We'll be on Teams from 2 to 4. I don't know if the word is extravaganza, Linda, but we'll have some kind of pieces coming together at the end of the term. And one of the pieces, and I know this is also Linda's feeling, is that the needs assessment is just such an important piece of this. So I know we're all anxious to hear the information, but also just to be able to be part of it, and then really talk about where would this go, not only individually in our own programs, but as a group. So it's very exciting. It's the things, it's like years ago when I used to work in OPM. Data, we have data. It was funny when Mark was on last time. It was like, data, we can have data. This is great. So I think congratulations, Linda. Excellent work. And Mary and all the staff. And one of the things we used to be able to do when we met in person was we get to walk around a little bit at the office and check out with people and stuff. But I think we used to always have that little tour for the new people, right? Didn't we have a tour? And yeah, so we could try it virtually. I don't know. We'll see, the traveling camera or something. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Judge Baldini. It's been great to have you on as co-chair. So June 14th, please put it on your calendar. If you have any questions or updates, let Jean know. And thank you, Jeannie. You're always just fabulous to keep us on track. Okay. Good rest of the day. Bye-bye.